Assets in Natgen Funds revalued periodically as required by both accounting standards and by the law. Typically that's done by the directors on a periodic basis, and then that flows through to what our unit values are for each fund. But as I said, the unit values don't change very much because the underlying asset values don't change either quickly or radically. So that's why our unit values are actually very, very steady over time. One thing that's less steady is the unit value rise for our development funds, because of course during the development process there's not much movement because you're spending money, but then you get to the point where you're actually selling the product or revaluing the product, and that can be a much larger gain. So for example, with our Natgen Development Trust UC22, we're looking at revaluing those assets in the next little while from the dollar that they started at to now about $1.70. So that's a pretty massive increase over that time. And that same sort of level of increase comes about with most of our developments over time. For example, with our CM23 Development Trust, we forecast that we'd have about a 24% return on investment over the term of the trust, and that's now looking closer somewhere between 35 and 40% depending on when we finish. And we're getting similar outcomes across our development trust portfolio. So whilst these numbers are just preliminary, I can give you a little bit of an update on what our position is on our development trust that we're looking at finishing in 2025. So we started with UC22, which of course started in 2022, and basically it allowed for an expected uplift in value of the units of 42.17% over both the construction period and the let-up period. So it's probably about half that for the construction period and then further for the let-up period. So we've just finished the construction period, and we can say probably half that growth was due in that time. So about 21% of that growth was due in that time. So we've just had that valuation and we're revaluing those units to $1.70, so it's a 70% uplift instead of the 21% expected. And our projection now is that when we get to the end of the let-up period, which is about 2 years from now, we should have that going up to about 110%. And that's the one you compare with the 42.17, which we had in the information memorandum. As you can see, that's a pretty good result. We've got similar things for ML23, which is another large-scale self-storage. After the end of construction of that one, we were expecting it to be about 16% above. We're just revaluing that one to 31%, so it's gone from 16 to 31. And then the 37.1%, which we expected at the end of the let-up period, we're now expecting that to be between about 55 and 60%. So that's another significant overperformance above what our expectations were. To carry on that theme, OR23, our Ormo development, we allowed for 24.13% within the information memorandum. We're not quite sure of the end value of that. It's pretty much all sold, but there's a couple more months to go in the process, so we're expecting that to be somewhere in the early 30s. So again, it's significantly above where it was, where we were expecting it to be. Now I'm just going to take a little break to just scratch my nose because something's boring into my head and I just need to do that.
You need a tissue?
No, I don't need a tissue, I just had an itch. So from there, if we move on to CM23, we've actually just finished the CM23 and the certificate of occupancy has just issued. Now CM23 we're expecting to provide investors with about 25.14% return, and it'll be somewhere between 35 and 40% return by the time the money gets back into the hands of the unit holders over the next 3 months. So again, a big uplift. And then our final one, which will finish this year, is our YB24 Development Trust, which actually the wall panels have literally just come out of the ground in the last week. So we allowed for a 25.42% return on that, and we've set the prices. We know what the development costs will be now, but it'll be significantly above that. We're not in a position to state that yet, but it will certainly have a 3 in front of it and maybe a 4. So that's where we're sitting within our trust portfolio, our development trust portfolio at this stage.